Yes, good afternoon, almost good evening here already. Namaste. I had a question that somebody had sent in. Um, Let me see if I can get over there and find it again so that I can read it exactly as it is. Here it is. Namaste, Guruji. Could you please do a video on the dark night of the soul? Also, please explain quantum physics and non-duality. There is too much emphasis on quantum and spirituality. It all goes above my head. Time and space don't exist, etc. Does understanding these things have any relevance in spiritual growth? Thanks. Well, the only relevance it has in spiritual growth is once you're already there and experience it for yourself, and then you'll understand it. As far as some type of a philosophical stance, it's not going to aid you. Okay, again, talking about non-duality, unless you are in that consciousness, it's not going to aid you. Some people think that they get the Advaita thing, and if they just say, "I'm already that," there's nothing to get. Again, it's not going to help you. As long as your mind is in division, then you're not going to understand non-duality, because non-duality is an absolute shift in consciousness. Once that shift takes place, nobody has to explain it to you because it's your reality from that point forward. Okay. Until that point, it's not going to do much to try to speak about it. Sorry about this. I'm looking really green on this thing. This room has the absolute worst lights ever. All the lights are like a yellow cast, and everything just looks green, like I'm ill here. I'm trying to turn it so it's not so green looking. There, that's a little better. Okay. I'm not actually ill, it just looks that way with this green light. Anyway, so forget about non-duality. Quantum, again, has to do with every atom is the same as every other atom. Everything contains the whole universe within the single atom, and that the projection of mind moves it into quantum, moves it into viability. Again, it's not going to help you to try to understand it intellectually. As one goes further on the path, these things will become known to yourself as they are, without explanation. Okay, so for now, just don't worry about it. It's not going to benefit you to be able to understand it intellectually, or to have a philosophical stance about it, or to name and claim it, as New Age people want to do, name and claim. Just let it go for now. Okay. As far as the dark night of the soul, okay, this comes much later in the journey. Okay, it's one of the most difficult places to pass through. For some, it can be a short time. For here, it was, I would say, a good year. A year and a half to pass through that state. The state of the dark night of the soul is like when Christ was on the cross and he was saying, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And this happens just before one finally, and then he says, "Unto God I commend my spirit." This is just before your total surrender. into that death before death. Okay, so this, when one enters the dark night of the soul, it's so intense. It's, you know, some people will say, I'm in the dark night of the soul, I'm going through depression. It's so, depression is so light compared to what this is. Okay, this is absolutely agonizing. You can barely take the next breath. You can feel the weight of the world. You can feel the anguish of the world. And literally, you can hardly breathe. It's like waiting for the next moment to take place. And you're praying for death at that point. Absolutely praying for death. Okay? Because the torture of that feeling is beyond description. Again, it's feeling the weight of the world, not only your own weight in your own agony, in your own pain, but again, the pain and the agony of the world. And at that point, like I said, you can barely breathe. You can't, it's so heavy, so dark, so beyond description. Again, at that point, you're praying for death, literally praying for death, because you don't think you can take another second of it. But you do. You continue to persevere. You continue to pray. You continue to lay yourself at the feet of God daily. But when this breaks, the next part is even more difficult. As difficult as it was to feel that pain, to feel that, the next part, in one way you do die. You go into this void, devoid, where you feel like you're separated from God, you know, and it's such a dark void. Then you wish you had that pain back, because this is like being dead and having no feelings whatsoever. You're numb, you know, there is no feeling of connection anywhere. One goes through that next part, which is void, devoid. Okay? And then from that point, that void and devoid, at that point when you're in the void and devoid, you're praying for resurrection. Okay? I've gone through this and I've prayed for death. Now it feels like I've died, and there, you know, but you're in no man's land. Where is this resurrection? Where is the resurrection? Okay. But eventually then one does come out of that and goes into the next point of the journey, where one has done all that one can. And you know that you've done everything you can in your path, and you absolutely surrender to God. At that point, it's you physically, literally, I sat down and said unto, you know, I lay myself on the altar of truth, you know, and at that point, you again feel like you're going to go through this death, like you're physically dying, and it's so dark feeling, and it's so, you don't know, it's this absolute terror, like being, I've explained it this way, like you're in the Grand Canyon, it's pitch black, and you know there's this deep dark chasm, but you're compelled to go forward. So it's absolute moments of terror at that point, but knowing that one has to go forward. And so again, you are on the altar of truth. I lay myself, and it's only up to God whether I survive or I don't. You know, it's that. Okay, and then one totally lets go. You can't hold anything back. You have to totally surrender at that point. At that point of the journey, one totally surrenders. And the next second, There's this shift that takes place. One is no longer seeing a world. There's no cognition with any of the five senses. One is beyond that, shifted into non-duality. Everything that, again, one thought one was has broken. It's dissolved. It's imploded into this vast is, what is termed God, this life force. And then the illusion is broken at that point. Then one knows the life of all life, the death of all death, this light beyond lights, this ever-present that's never been born and never died, and one is that. Okay? So all of these things, this dark night of the soul and what proceeds from there, and it's the last purification, the last stripping bare before there is that, what some will call a unification, or that, again, it's a death before death that takes place in that consciousness that comes to that realization, moksha, liberation. Okay. And this happens in the path of Christian saints, contemplatives, or can happen in the path of, like I said, in the Kundalini awakening. One goes through the levels and layers of consciousness as well. Okay. It's not something that one is searching for, saying, oh, this is the next level, I need to do that. No, it's just where one is pulled on that mystic's path in the journey. It's what takes place, okay? So I hope this has helped to answer that point. Please don't mistake that, oh, I'm having trouble, I'm having, depression, I feel bad, as the dark night of the soul. That depression can't touch it, okay? Depression is part of it in one way, but that's not it, okay? When we talk about the dark night of the soul, it's a specific thing that happens toward the end of a contemplative's journey. Okay, the last stripping bare that takes place. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I hope it helps you to understand what happens in the midst of the journey. When you're in that, like again I said, it's so devastating, so difficult. One has, again, you go through the temptations, you go through these feelings then of separation, of once one has gone through the absolute pain of all of this, confrontation of all your fears, all the dramas, everything, that dark night of the soul hits. And then after that, one goes through that period of, you prayed for death, okay, now you get basically death. This is what death is like when there's no, if you were really separated from God, this is what it would be. Trust me, it's a hell realm when there is no feeling of that connection, okay? And one perceives what it's like. It's beyond what you can imagine. It's beyond what you can imagine. So when everything breaks and one sees that life and that life force, and you can never truly be separated from it. It's, yes, Satchidanand. Truth, consciousness, bliss. Okay, that's what remains. Okay, one has done the whole of that journey. Okay, and rests in that. Namaste. Have a great evening.